There we go. A recording has been started. Well, thank you for letting me know that. Hello, guys. It is MTG Steam Brewery here. It's been a long time. We've been busy. We're currently in our middle of our summer break, and we're getting back into Standard Magic, which has been a really long time since I showed you guys Standard, and I have a bit of a brew here, as normal, playing brews. It is a Grixis control. Over here it says Noxious Gearhulk, but there have been some changes. It's kind of just leaning towards more of just a generic control deck. It's just efficient removals, counter spells, and some decent threats, so we'll go through it. We got lands. Now, if you're playing floor Glimmer of Genius, you maybe want 4 Aether Hubs. We're playing 2 Glimmer of Genius, so we're only playing the 1 Aether Hub. And though there are times it'll come up in the 26 lands, surprisingly you'll only get stuck on 5 lands, which only 5 in this deck. That's a problem, because you want a lot, as you can see, a lot of our important spells are 3 mana, or when we get to 4 mana and want to have 2 mana spells up at the same time. Needs 6 mana to do that, and it can get difficult to start playing multiple spells in a turn, and then if you start stumbling at 5 mana, your opponent can start casting 2 spells in one turn, and it can get real hard to pull you back in the game. So that's been awkward, but there are people like playing 25 lands and 24 lands and not having problems. Of course, those decks tend to have a bit more cyclers than we do. But I like the 26 lands. I definitely don't want to go to 27. Maybe the correct answer is just to add cycling cards. But this is the mana base we went with. Aether Hub, even as Tendo Icebridge, which, for those of you who don't know what Tendo Icebridge was, it was pretty much this, which is on the screen right now, except it came with a charge counter on it, and you just remove the charge counter, then you could never make colored mana, it could only make colorless mana. This, with Glimmer of Genius and Dynovault Tower in the deck, which we'll get to here later, can allow it to tap for mana throughout the game. And even as a Tendo Icebridge, it's still been pretty good. It was originally a Smoldering Marsh in the mana base, which you see 2 of down here. But this has just been so much better, even when it becomes a colorless land, because even a 1-use blue mana has been very helpful early in the game. And it always enters untapped. That is important, always having untapped lands time. Blighted Fen, for those who don't know what this is, I'll pull this over here, because this is a weird card that most people haven't played in a while. It is a K land that makes colorless mana, but if you tap 6 mana total, 4 black and you can sacrifice it, and target opponent sacrifices a creature. Now that you're thinking that's a lot for that effect, well, it comes on a land, so it is free. It is a free spell essentially, and it is a land that enters untapped. Sure, it doesn't make colored mana, but in the 26 lands, we're trying to play our tap lands early, and then later in the game start playing our untapped lands, so we can start playing our 3 drops on turn 3, tap land on turn 4 if we have another counter spell and no 4 mana thing to do with it. Have an untapped land for turn 5 for a threat or 2 spells. Chocked Estuary. Kind of generic, enters untapped if you an island or swamp, which Fetid Pools, the 1 cycling land in the deck, will allow it to do. Smoldering Marsh, Sunken Hollow, which enter untapped when you get 2 basics, also allow it to enter untapped early in the game. Evolving Wild, just go get the basics. Mainly islands, almost always just end up getting islands down here in the mana base. There's 4 islands, 2 swamps, and 1 mountain. The mountain is only there's an Evolving Wilds target. I don't like the mountain. There's not a lot of red cards in the deck overall, but it's important to be able to activate Wandering Fumueral throughout the game and cast red spells early in the game. As you see, there's not a lot of red in the deck, at least the main deck. That's the mana base. Now we get to the spells. Fatal Push, just one of the best removal spells. Always kill something that costs 2 or less. If you can revolt it, hits 4 or less. Evolving Wilds is the best way to trigger that. It is sometimes difficult to get this revolted without Evolving Wilds. It's almost impossible, really, in this deck to get the revolt trigger. So it's really just a 1 mana kill something that costs 2 or less in most cases. Give me just a second, guys. And we're back. Sorry about that, guys. But yeah, normally this is just a cheap, efficient early removal spell in the current standard format, which is Amonkhet, and from Amonkhet back all the way to the Battle for Zendikar block. This can hit a lot of things. Heart of Kiran's, randomly Sylvan Advocate sometimes sees play, but not often. Mostly this is going to be good against aggressive decks. In the current standard, pretty much good against everything that's not Marvel. Because Marvel, depending on the version you're playing against, sometimes they have certain con of the wit. Most of them just don't have things that this is going to hit on the first half. So most of the game for this deck in particular, and probably the blue-black control that Shaheen Soorani's been playing, is just not going to get revolted on. It's going to sit there and run your hand. But against every other matchup, it's good. Hits Heart of Kiran's, hits man lands, it's a big thing. Hits early aggressive creatures. And that's just the only 1-drop in the main deck. You see some over here in the sideboard, but then our 2-drop slot is really where a lot of our early interactions are going to come from, and not the 3-drops. Though there are some good 3-drops, it's mainly the 2-drops. Anticipate's just a nice early cantrip. Before, I don't remember, I think it was a Never Return. Originally there was 4 in the deck. I've trimmed down to 2 after playing with it. Anticipate's been nice. It's good early, helps you hit the land drops, help you find a removal spell. But later in the game, it's been a lot better than a Never Return, because it's something you can hit with Torrential Gearhulk. For those of you who haven't played Standard, this card is just insane. It's right over here. It's like a giant Snapcaster Mage, but only for instance. Essence Scatter and Negate. A lot of people are just playing like Force Sensor in this spot right here. I preferred the hard counters because everyone's playing around Sensor. They know it's there. Now the nice thing about Sensor is you can cycle it to try and hit your lands early when your opponent's playing around it. With this deck, though, I think it's far more important to just be able to stop something. And these can't be Transgress the Mind, which we'll see play in main decks and sideboards, depending on who you're playing against. And just Essence Scatter only hits creatures, Negate hits non-creatures. In this current format, there's a lot of both of those. I went with a 3-1 split, because I do have a lot of 3-mana counter magic, and a lot of the non-creature spells you're worried about come from generally turn 4 onwards. There are some 3-drops that are really good that are non-creatures, but most of them are turn 4 onwards, where even if you play tap land on turn 3, they won't be able to punish you. Or tap land on turn 2, you'll still have a counterspell on turn 3 for the big 4-drop if they were on the play. But just the nice 2-mana hard counter. Collective Brutality is nice escalate of discard a card. So against a lot of decks, when you have those dead cards or cards you're just not going to have time to cast if you don't get enough time, it's got 3 modes. It can act as an early removal spell for small creatures. In this format, it hits Rogue Definers, still hits Early Conduits, still hits any of the 2-drop Mana Dorks that see play early in the game, hits aggressive creatures. It's also acts as Duress and control matchups, and then against aggressive decks, if you can't kill a creature, or if you can get 2 modes if you have a bad card in your hand, you can kill a creature and drain 2, gain 2, which in this, not having a lot of life gain, especially in the Grixis colors, missing out on Shambling Vents from like an Esper combination, this card is just nice and efficient. There's no Grasp of Darkness variant, but we do get, at the other 2-drop removal spells, we get Harness Lightning, which works well with Glimmer of Genius, still works well with Aether Hub, continues to fill Aether Hub if we don't have to use all the energy, or compare with Aether Hub to kill a 4-toughness creature such as Grasp of Darkness can, and it is a colorless in a red, so it's a bit easier to cast than black on the mana base. And pairs well with Glimmer of Genius later in the game. It can kill things Grasp of Darkness can't even touch. 1 Cut Ribbons, it's just 2 mana, 4 damage. Sure, it's only at sorcery speed, but unconditional, 4 damage, anything, bam. And the Aftermath, in this deck especially, because you can just get in a couple chip shots with a Torrential Gearhulk or a Wandering Fumueral, and the Aftermath on this will be able to hopefully close out a game, especially in the slow grindy control deck that's going to get to 10 plus lands. You'll be able to do it for 8 or so and end the game real fast. There are 3 Disallows and 1 Void Shatter as our counter split. Void Shatter just counters a spell and exiles it if it's countered this way, and then Disallow. It doesn't have the exile clause, but it's more versatile. It can hit spells, Planeswalker abilities, animating funerals, triggered abilities from like, I'm trying to think of all the triggered abilities. I'll just look at right here, Bedlam Reveler, right there, right in the deck. Like creatures that have a lot of enter the battlefield, or in the case of Ulamog, when you cast Ulamog, you exile 2 permanents. If you have an ability a way to counter Ulamog with Essence Scatter, you can counter the exile trigger, keep the 2 permanents, or if you have Blighted Fen in play, you can just counter the trigger and then Blighted Fen away the Ulamog, which I've done a couple times. The reason to do the 3-1 split here is because there's a lot of times that exile can come up relevant against the Delirium strategies, or a Liliana of the Death's Majesty, I believe, the new 5-drop one, where they kind of have the reanimation strategy going on, or against zombies, where any creature in their graveyard fuels Diregraph Colossuses. If you get to counter the Dreadful Wanderer, I think, it's the 1 black 2/1, enters tapped, and you can pay 3 at sorcery speed. If you have 1 or less cards in hand, put it back into play. It's a way to get that gone forever. Scrap Heap Scrounger is a big thing if they cast 1 later in the game. And it's still just a 3-mana solid counterspell, just slightly less versatile, but the exile can come up. At our Wraths in the deck, Grixis does not get a lot of Wraths. Johannes' Expertise is arguably the best one, besides Sweltering Suns, but hitting things with more than 4 toughness in Wrath, is when I'm filming this, and the Reese of Amonkhet, not going to happen if you're playing just straight Grixis. But maybe down the line. But for now, these will do. Flaying Tendrils, it's only -2/-2, but it has if a creature would die this turn, exile instead, which can come up a lot against zombies. Once again, Diagraph Colossus get really big later in the game. Scrappy Scroungers stops them from coming back. It can pair together with Radiant Flames to kill bigger creatures. Just spend 6 mana and 2 cards. Not as great as a 1-for-1, or a 1 Wrath card, but can pair together with the cheaper Wraths. And the big thing is that this and Radiant Flames, which Radiant Flames isn't quite Sweltering Suns, just deals X damage to each creature X the number of colors spent to cast it, which, on the rarest of occasions, only once has this come up when I cast Radiant Flames, that I had Blighted Fen and Island Smoldering Marsh. And more islands. And I had 3 islands, Smoldering Marsh, Blighted Fen was the only time I could only cast Radiant Flames for 2. With 5 lands in play. But that's just how it ended up being. But other than that, I've normally would cast this for 3 pretty much every time. Now, the reason to play this over a card like Sweltering Suns is because Sweltering Suns is red-red, which for almost the whole deck, including the sideboard, we have avoided red-red on our spells, because that's a large stress on the mana base. Especially because we want blue-blue and black-black by turn 3. Having blue-blue, black-black, red-red by turn 3 without playing a bunch of come-into-play tap lands is really stretchful on the mana base. So we have avoided that. We've gone for having the red-red later in the game, which has made Sweltering Suns not as attractive in the current iteration of this deck. It might change. We might go more towards a blue-red style, splashing black, but for now we're going blue-blue, black-black as our main colors, and then red-red later in the game. Though, as you see, there's not a lot of black spells either. It's just really we want black-black for Never to Return if they have Gideons, black for an early Fatal Push, or Collective Brutality is a big thing. And then Unless Disintegration is another, is just instant removal. It kills anything, and if we have an artifact such as our Gearhulks or Dynovault Tower, they also take 3 damage, which paired with Torrential Gearhulk, you can Torrential Gearhulk, disintegrate a guy, hit a planeswalker, and potentially kill it, or double cast a disintegration and get to deal 6 damage to a planeswalker and kill 2 guys has been really good with Torrential Gearhulk. And is just 3 mana, kills anything. Definitely better than Murder. Easier to cast. Black-red has come up. Sometimes I don't always have black-black because I don't always need black-black. There's not a lot of black-black spells you see in the deck. It's almost blue-blue, and then very rarely is anything more than blue-blue. It's 1 red, 1 black, and just a few spells are black-black. And Dynovault Tower, now this is not a centerpiece of the deck. There are Dynovault Tower decks in the format. I've gone with only playing 1 because it's not great in every matchup. It's not great against Marvel. In fact, I board it out often against Marvel. They're keeping in their Descenders Deliverances. They're boarding in Answers to Gearhulks. This card, though powerful, can also be slow if you're not playing a lot of energy. Like, if you're playing a Dynovault Tower deck, you're generally playing more Harness Lightnings, more Glimmer of Geniuses, more Aether Hubs. This deck isn't really fueling the energy, but if it is a nice card, it can fuel energy on its own. Whenever you cast a source, you get energy, and you can pay 5 energy and deal 3 damage to something. This can easily kill a Planeswalker over the course of 2 turns with this deck. Can handle creatures, can kill most of the manlands in the format, Lumbering Falls being the real exception. But it has just been super, super good to have. It's also won me a couple games where I've just been able to kill them over the course of a couple turns because I haven't had a lot going on. This plus Fumueral has been able to kill them, and I've used removal spells to keep the board clear. Never to Return is not great. Ruinous Path was also better in probably the previous format, but it's gone to the new format. Sorcery speed, triple 3 mana removal spells are not very good. This is Destroy Target Creature or Planeswalker, which is the only reason we're playing the card over a card more Unlicensed Disintegrations is because it hits Planeswalkers. The Aftermath on this does sometimes come up, where you can exile a card, not a creature card, a card from a graveyard and make a 2/2 black zombie, where that comes up against Scrappy Scroungers, the Dreaded Wanderer, or the whatever the 1-drop choice is in the zombie decks right now that's not Cryptbreaker. It can also pair together just in the game. This deck doesn't have a lot of Fatal Push target, so this will give your opponent a Fatal Push target, but it also just gives you a creature that can block sometimes. And I've had a lot of turns where I've nevered a guy, exiled another one, blocked, and been able to stabilize because I was able to survive that 1 extra turn thanks to the 2/2 blocker. There have also been times where I've just done it and then it immediately died and I didn't really get a lot of value other than exiling a card, which only really mattered for cards like Scrappy Scrounger. But it can also occasionally come up against other decks. New perspectives, randomly, that can come up sometimes. If they cycled something, or I guess not. If they cycled it on your turn, it's probably not going to happen. But there are a few times where it randomly come up that you can exile something. Other Aftermath cards, like Commit to Memories, Cut to Ribbons, can come up in the format, which is why we're playing this over Ruinous Path. Give me a second. I'm really dry throat lately. Sorry, guys. And then this is where most control decks have a lot more of these. I'm not playing as many draw spells in the deck, as you can see. I am playing mostly answers. Oops, I hit my nice new microphone. I'm playing almost all answers in the deck, and then some heavy-ended threats, and then a few draw spells. Most people go towards, there's 8+ draw spells in their deck. Like, if you look at Blue-Red Control, they got 4 Hieroglyphic Illuminations, which is 4 mana, draw 2 cards, have cycling of 1 blue, 4 Glimmer of Genius, and 2 Pull from Tommorows. I have 2 Glimmers, 2 Pulls, and the 1 Anticipate in the deck. I have gone a lot more with having answers more consistently, because there are a lot of times I've played control decks in the past where I have a lot of draw spells but nothing to interact with my opponent, and I have to spend all my time drawing. I start to fall behind on the board, and I start spending mana on my turn to start answering things, which can put you really far behind, whereas with this deck I just have more answers than draw spells, which against mid-range decks and aggressive decks is a lot better. But against other control decks, if you mistime your spells, if you try to be forcing them to react, you can fall behind real fast. You need to time your spells carefully playing this against other control decks. Whereas if you're playing another control deck, you don't necessarily have to be as careful because you've got more draw spells. This one, if you just start jamming your threats, you're going to lose really fast. You need to very carefully time your spells. And with this deck particularly, you generally have to have your control opponent act before you do, and then start reacting with your threats. Which is generally the way people try to play, but other control decks can start jamming their threats. If they start drawing a lot of cards, they'll get multiple threats, they can just start jamming them. This deck doesn't have that draw power. And then we have 1 Commit to Memory. This is a pseudo counterspell, pseudo removal spell. On the front side, it can, any spell or non-land permanent you can put in his owner's library second from the top. So if your opponent, say, shuffles and they have a permanent in play that you don't want to have, if, like, say they play Tune with Aether, you can put that permanent in, you can respond to it, put that permanent into their deck, and now they have to shuffle it away. Can work with Aetherworks Marvel. If they spin it, you can put it in their top, and if they want the Aetherworks Marvel back, they then have to cast that over something else, though that rarely comes up. You can hit Cast Outs, which in this deck, enchantments, artifacts, really hard to interact with in the main deck, depending on your build. You can build with red, you get artifact removal, but you don't get enchantment removal in Grixis colors almost ever that aren't artifacts, such as Universal Solvent in the current standard, which is not a card you want to play if you can avoid it. So we're playing 1 Commit. It's a way to answer enchantments, way to answer planeswalkers at instant speed. It's not a permanent answer, but it can pair together with a counterspell to permanently answer something. And there are times where you can just get a blocker out of the way and start bashing in, and then the back half sometimes comes up. It is at sorcery speed, that is a problem. But the aftermath is each player shuffles his or her hand, graveyard into your library, and then draw 7 cards. So all the permanents in play stay in play. But you and your opponent both will take everything else, draw a whole new 7. Now, if you're playing this at sorcery speed, your opponent gets the first crack with their new 7 cards and draws for an 8th card. That can be a huge problem with this deck if you don't have a lot of answers, or a very big board presence. But because the front half of this is an instant and commit, when you cast Torrential Gearhulk, and this works with all split cards that have the same thing, if one half's an instant, when it enters, you target instant or sorcery in your graveyard and cast it without paying its mana cost. You can target commit, and because the front half is an instant, you cast the card. How Aftermath works is when you cast this card, you can cast Aftermath. You can cast Memory from your graveyard specifically. So, since you targeted the commit, you can instead choose to cast Memory instead of commit, or you can still cast the commit. And at your opponent's end step, you can Time Twister, which is you shuffle your hand graveyard, draw new 7 cards, which is really powerful. If the board state's pretty even, you're falling behind on cards, you can then get rid of something, Gearhulk, and both get a new 7. You have the first crack at your cards, and you have a Torrential Gearhulk in play. And you shuffled all the bad cards in from your opponent's graveyard. With this deck, there's not a lot of bad cards generally that you don't mind drawing. And you shuffle all their bad cards back into their deck. Now they have new cards. They don't have a game plan anymore. They have to shape it around what is drawn now. And you get to refuel your hand and get your turn before they do. So that's a real big reason to play 1 commit in the deck. I used to sideboard it, but I've played with the deck. I've brought it in against almost every deck. Red-White Humans being the exception, but against most other decks, I've wanted the commit to memory because it's a way to answer gods, enchantments, artifacts, planeswalkers. Not always permanently, but it has been very helpful. And then planeswalkers in these strategies generally a very good way to win. You could play a Chandra Flamecaller. It is a slightly bigger wrath. It can hit things with 4 toughness. It is 6 mana, and I don't own any copies in online. I have access to one in paper now, but it is certainly a way to win with the Grixis style strategies. We have 1 Jace Unraveler Secrets. His +1 is you scry 1, then draw a card. His -2 is you bounce a creature. And he starts at 5, so you can do that twice before he can't do it again. And his ultimate is you get an emblem with whenever an opponent casts his or her first spell on each turn, not just their turn, your turn and their turn, they counter that spell. That has won me many games. If you ultimate this Jace, it's not a stone cold straight up win the game, but it makes the game a lot easier to win. And against, especially like Marvel in the format, if you just resolve a Jace and get to ultimate it, you're generally going to win that game. Not always, but generally, because they can't exile the emblem. It's not technically a permanent, so Ulamog cannot exile it. It will counter the Ulamog itself if they spend their whole turn to cast it, and is just an efficient way. It's a way to get card advantage. And even against aggressive decks, I found, like, turn 3 Wrath, turn 4, either have counterspell, remove a spell for the backup play, turn 5 Jace, bounce the one creature they have left in play, and then they have to start recasting it. You get to untap. You get to use your Jace, start finding more cards. That's when you get turn 6 that you can start casting Gearhulks, or more removal spells, or counter spells, or draw spells, and you can just start to really pull ahead. So even though he's not always great against aggressive decks if you're really far behind, once you've kind of handled the board, or almost have the board cleared, he can come down and really help you stabilize. Obnixilious is a similar thing, whereas his is a -3 though, but it destroys the creature, doesn't bounce it, so it kills it permanently, in most cases. But this takes him down to 2, so he can't do it again right away. And his +1 is you draw a card and you lose a life. Drawing cards is great. Losing life is a cost to that. I'm fine paying that cost. Not everyone is against aggressive decks, that's not so great. But against aggressive decks, I'm never going to sideboard this out. It's generally 5 mana, kill a creature, and they're going to spend some resources in attacking it so it can gain you a lot of life. And if they don't kill it, it's a source of card advantage. Sure, you're losing life. But a big motto if you're playing Grixis is, if you have more than 1 life, you're not dead. Generally with Grixis.
Very true in this current format.
Yep.
As I'm here now, guys.
Yeah, not a lot of burn spells.
Yeah, burn spells have just gotten so bad. Like there's a few good ones, but nobody's playing them.
Yep.
Because they're just playing actual removal.
Other than the Madness deck.
Yeah, Unlicensed Integration is the best burn spell currently.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and then the Obnixilious Reignited emblem, though it won't win the game right away like a Jace emblem, it will come real close in this deck. Yep. When you ultimate, whenever a player draws, you give an emblem to a target opponent. So if they're hexproof, you can't do it. But target opponent gets an emblem with whenever a player draws a card, you lose 2 life. So whenever anyone draws a card, you or your opponent, they will lose 2 life. With Pull from Tommorow specifically, you can generally kill them on the spot if you ultimate your Obnixilious. But you can also just spend a couple turns playing Glimmers, or if you have Jace in play, plussing drawing cards, and they will just die really fast to their own turns and your turns, and you don't really have to. You just have to react to what they're doing and wait for them to kill them. Is how I've won a lot of games. And then the big beef of the deck is Torrential Gearhulk. This is a control mainstay for a lot of decks. Whether you run 2 to 4, varying on the list you see, he's just so good. It is 6 mana. It is not cheap, but it is a 5/6 flash creature, and you get any instant in the deck. And then this deck and control decks that play it, there's a lot of instants, as is the nature of control decks, that aren't a sorcery speed tap out version of control. So having a way to buy back a draw spell, or a counter spell, or a remove spell, and have a 5/6 on the board. There are a lot of times where you'll play this, get a counter spell, and be able to keep the board, either keep them from attacking or start pressuring them really quickly with 5 power body, especially since they pair really well together, getting multiple counter spells, multiple removal spells.
I don't think we have to go into too much detail on Torrential Gearhulk.
Yeah, been a big mainstay in Sanders.
It's the biggest blue card in Sanders.
Another big Gearhulk in this deck is the one of Noxious Gearhulk. It is, as I'll pull up right here, 5/4 with Menace for 6. Not a great rate, but not terrible. Here's when he gets really good. It's when he enters, you can destroy another target creature, and you gain life equal to its toughness. Now, that has come up being worse, but there's also times where you get an Ishkanah, which you want dead anyway, because that card can kill you with its activated ability. You then gain 5 life. Against aggressive decks, they generally have a lot of higher toughness, or higher power, lower toughness creatures. Not always with, like, Thraben Inspectors. I can't remember the other one right now, but it occasionally sees play. It's not Tool of Assembler, because that comes with 3/2. And is a 1/1 on your turn.
Yeah.
So, but just, it is a way to gain life with Collective Brutality. Not a lot of life against aggressive decks, but against mid-range decks where you're getting Glory Bringers. If you can get a Bristling Hydra, I did manage to get a Bristling Hydra when I played this and had Disallow, and they only had 3 energy. That was great. Hitting opposing Gearhulks, or if you really have to, and I've done this once, and it did win me the game, I hit my own Torrential Gearhulk and to gain the 6 life.
Nope.
It didn't feel great, but it did win me the game.
Of note, The creature does have to be destroyed for people who aren't watching.
Yes,
it does have to be destroyed. So if you hit like an Ulamog or something with it from a Marvel player, you don't gain the life. It's a 5/4 that chump blocks basically against Ulamog.
But it does have menace, so it also is a way to deal damage really fast because they can't just chump it. They have to put 2 blockers in front of it, and being 5 power, it can eat a lot of creatures really fast. And then this is the newest edition. We used to play Painful Truths in the main deck. I've started testing a 1 of Bedlam Reveler. I have drawn it once so far. Technically twice in testing. Just the other time I had to put it at the bottom of my library with Anticipate. So I didn't actually draw it. I was really sad. It was turn 2, and I only had 3 lands, and I was nowhere near casting it, and there was the 4th land in there. So I had to take the 4th land. But he costs 1 less for each instant sorcery in your graveyard. There's a lot of sorceries in this deck, so later in the game he will very likely be red for a 3/4. Which I said, there's not a lot of red spells, but we're not playing him on turn 2. We're playing this card generally turn 5 or later, when we're running low on a hand, and in a lot of matchups you will get dead cards, which is where his ability comes in. When you enter, you discard your hand, then draw 3 cards. The one time I drew it was against a Marvel. I was playing against Marvel. I had cut to ribbons, never return, and a land. He had nothing. He'd had nothing for a while. In fact, he'd had so much nothing, I just hadn't been able to react. I only had 1 instant in my graveyard, so I paid 7. I still had 3 mana. This was how long the game had went. I discarded my hand, then drew an Essence Scatter, a Void Shatter, and a removal spell. So it was like I just stitched 3 terrible cards, got Unleashed Integration, Void Shatter, Essence Scatter. My hand just got amazing and covers most of the bases I need to worry. Now, it won't always be good, but there's a lot of situations where this card is going to be very good.
It won't always be the best possible brainstorm ever.
Nope.
But
it does have prowess as well, so it can get bigger the more spells you cast, especially if you're casting them in the middle of combat.
It is a 3/4 base?
It is a 3/4 base. So it's not super small. It's not super big, but it's not super small. It is a way to filter through your deck. Yeah, the 4 toughness is big.
Avoid singular rogue refiners, which is a big thing. Tireless Tracker that doesn't have a clue yet.
1 Harness Lightning, they have to spend the extra energy, which is a big thing. With every creature you'll notice in the deck that's not the zombie token from Never to Return,
Harness
Lightning has to spend an extra energy. Which against Marvel Aetherworks specifically, which is a big thing right now, which is the toughest matchup for this deck by far.
Yeah.
Every other deck is a pretty even matchup across the board. And with tuning, you can tune this deck to beat the decks you want to beat. I'm trying to keep it as even across the board and trying to hedge my Marvel matchup, which has worked out pretty well for me. Which is where we'll get to the sideboard. That's the main deck. The Bedlam Reveler, once again, testing it now at the time I'm recording this. I'll be putting this up after I go to a standard PPTQ. I've been testing it a lot online, and we'll see how it goes. The sideboard, 2 Magma Sprays, once again. Scrap Heap Scrounger, huge problem in this format. Card is a superstar. I wish I could play in this deck.
Should have been better designed.
But that's a discussion for another time.
Yeah, it's just too good.
This is also just a cheap removal spell against aggressive decks. Hits Thraben Inspectors.
Zombies, Restless Dead.
You're never happy to hit a Thraben Inspector. It comes
Red
up.
Wonder.
Yeah. Toolcraft Exemplars. Yep. Veteran Motorist does come up a lot. Thalias. There's a lot of X2s in the format that are really powerful.
Any deck that's not Marvel or mid-range, it's good against.
Sure.
Because every other deck is aggressive.
Dispel. This is mainly because everyone's starting to sideboard their own negates and dispels. I was a big fan of this before.
For those of you who actually do play Magma Spray in whatever deck you're playing, Wandering Fumueral, which is your manland, if they activate it, if you hit it in response, it means they can't actually save it because it hasn't switched yet. Activating in response just still switches to that 4/1. So if you're ever playing against people with Wandering Fumuerals, you hit it in response to them activating it, so that way no matter what, it will die because they can't actually save it.
Correct.
As Josh has run into multiple times.
Yep. Dispel only counters instants. It's worse than the gate, but it does cost only 1 mana. Mm-hmm. So when you're trying to counter a spell and they have counter spells in return, Dispel's a good way to help get through that counter war, which is the only reason it's in the deck. I'm a big fan of this card in Modern and in previous standards. Right now, I'm not the biggest fan of it. There's a lot of sorceries, creatures, and artifacts that are just so powerful that Dispel's not going to hit a lot of things game 1. Game 2, when your opponents, like especially Marvel Aetherworks and other control decks, and random blue aggressive decks in the format, are all sideboarding their own negates and Dispels. Yeah, Martyr Vehicles with blue has counter spells.
That was real.
Metallic Rebukes. Ceremonious Rejection, though that doesn't come in against us. No. But it randomly comes up that you want to spell. 1 more negate. We don't want too many of these. Once again, creatures are a big deal right now. Even in the Marvel deck, they're killing you with mostly creatures other than Shadow Flamecaller.
Even in control decks.
Yeah, even in control decks, most of them have to kill you with creatures. There's not a lot of great non-creatures that aren't Planeswalkers nowadays.
Yeah, Cut. The back half of Cut is really the best card
Yep.
that this immediate comes to mind, aside from Approach to the Second Sun, which nobody's really playing.
Nope. The fourth Disallow, because it's just another 3-mana counterspell. Great to have in certain matchups. Mid-range decks. Randomly, sometimes, if you're having a problem, not with something, once it's resolved, your trouble's answering it, if you can't bounce it, this can help buy some time if it's an activated triggered ability, and it's just a nice counterspell. Another Radiant Flames, 3 mana for 3 damage. The 3 mana wraths are going to be a big deal against the super aggressive decks. Only having up to 3 anyway, having 3 mana wraths can be a huge deal. One Kefnet the Mindful. This is for your control matchups. This is for your slower, like the Jund style mid-range decks where they have removal. They're going to be able to
play. Pretty much, if it's not aggro, it's not bad.
That is not necessarily
pretty
true.
much. If it's not like a Blitzdire or Elder Fiend.
And I will show the sideboard strategy for Marvel at the end of this, because that's pretty big in this format. But it's just super nice.
Currently, it's the biggest.
Indestructible 5/5.
Yeah.
You can't attack and block unless you have 7 cards on hand, which sometimes is hard to do, but not always, especially if you're just not casting things. But he has the ability with 4 mana draw a card, then you may return a land, which can save your Blighted Fens from an Ulamog trigger, Wandering Fumueral from removal spells. But mainly, you're just going to use it to draw a card. You're not ever going to bounce a land if you can't avoid it.
That's more of a thing potentially for older formats. Lands that matter. EDH is a big deal about that. But standard is mostly just draw.
If you're doing it on your turn to hit a land drop and you don't get a land, you can just bounce the land, put you up 7 cards, attack, and then replay the land. Has come up. Bouncing Aether Hub.
Bouncing Aether Hub is
Can
not
come
bad.
up. Can come up. Summary Dismissal. This is because Ulamog and Worldbreaker are such big cards. This is exile all spells and counter all other abilities. Now, even without Marvel, I'd probably still play 1 because Sphinx are the final words in the format.
Pro tip: it's horrible in a counter war.
Yeah. If you were to use this in a counter war, you do not always want this against control decks. You maybe want 1, maybe 2, because it counters all of your spells. So if this is your counter war spell, you do not use this to initiate this fight over your spells. You use it on their spells only, because if you cast it, it will exile your spell as well.
It almost beat me in a counter war today.
Yep.
But it didn't.
It can also counter all abilities. Which on Ulamog, it exiles Ulamog the spell and counters his triggered ability.
Which is the biggest thing.
With Worldbreaker, it counters his triggered ability, exiles
counters Planeswalker Ultimates.
Yep, it can counter Planeswalker Ultimates like Disallow. Is a big deal. Counter manly activations, Marvel activations. There randomly comes up where you can counter abilities, like with Disallow. Just having an extra copy sometimes matters. 1 Gehenna's Expertise. Once again, it's the 3 max thing, but it's 4 mana. It's just clean, -3/-3. No need to get colors. Worried about if you got blue and black only, you can still cast it. And the reason to play this instead of like another Flaying Tendrils is because against zombies and such, 1 Anthem effect will make your Flaying Tendrils not do very, very well. You generally want the 1 Flaying Tendrils anyway, and against vehicles it can come up.
The dream is Gehenna's Expertise into Flaying Tendrils.
Yeah, you can also Gehenna's Expertise into Flaying Tendrils, not Radiant Flames, into Flaying Tendrils, because Radiant Flames is Converge. If you Gehenna's Expertise, where you give -3/-3, you may then cast a card with mana cost 3 or less from your hand without paying as a mana cost. Radiant Flames would do nothing. Yeah. But post-board, this can come up randomly. It can cast Dynovault Tower, it can cast a draw spell and anticipate, a removal spell for a creature that survived. You're generally not going to be able to cast something off the back half, but it is just a clean 4 mana, -3/-3. So you go 3 mana Wrath, 4 mana Wrath.
Lacking good Wraths in these colors.
Yeah.
Hopefully, the best Wrath.
I really want to make Heaven to Earth work, which is 1 green X damage each creature flying on the first half, then the aftermath is red, and that's instant speed for the green half. The red X on the back half is Earth, where it is X damage each creature without flying, which I really want to play in this deck. But having the green attached to the front side...
Yeah, it's rough.
I can make some weird things work. I'm not going to bother trying to make that work.
Not 1 forest in the deck.
Yep. And then 1 Kalitas, Traitor of Ghet. This card is just great. It's good against aggressive decks. Not terrible against Marvel. Once again, the whole 4 toughness thing, as you'll see with every creature in the deck, everything survives the base of a Harness Lightning. It takes more than 1 energy, 1 use of a Harness Lightning to get it. They have to have other energy providers, which makes their Marvels less effective in a Marvel deck. It can make future Harness Lightnings less effective. It can make Aether Hubs more difficult to use. And it just kind of... all the creatures dodge Fatal Push as well. Kalitas being the exception if it's revolted. But he is a 3/4 lifelink for 4, and if a creature opponent controls dies, you get a 2/2 token out of it, and you exile that card. And you can sacrifice other zombies or vampires to put 2+++ counters on him. Now, this is you're only gonna be able to do that when you're killing your opponent's creatures, but He's really good against aggressive decks. He's fine against mid-range, and I bring him in against Marvel.
The biggest note against Marvel is the exile thing.
Yep, because it stops the Marvel Aetherworks from providing them with
normally
energy.
Marvel gets you a thing when a permanent it goes into the graveyard that prevents it entirely. So they don't actually get
welcome to deck techs.
Yeah, they don't actually get it.
With MTG Brewery. So this card's just been really solid. There's one confirmed suspicion. This was in my main deck. I moved it to the sideboard.
Oh, so good.
It may end up getting moved out. It's in here because I just really like the card. It's not great against every matchup. It's good against mid-range decks in particular, where they're trying to resolve bigger ended spells. They tap out. Sure, you're tapping out, but then you get 3 clues. You can start drawing cards throughout the game. Pair this with Torrential Gearhulk. You can draw up to 6 cards, which I have done. I've drawn 6 cards from confirmed suspicions, and it was really good.
It's also not bad against control.
It's not bad against control decks.
It's not the greatest counterspell.
It's a good one of in control mirrors where later in the game you're running out of counterspells. This can be a good one to refuel. Not great against aggressive decks. It's fine in Marvel in game 1, but post-board when they're boarding in negates into spells, you might want to try to avoid it. And then there's 2 Glorybringers, because as you saw with this deck, there's not a lot of creatures. There's 6 that aren't including the Fumueral, so 10 total.
For the most part, that's how this deck wins the creatures, unless you play Dynovault Tower and somehow get that much energy.
Or Ultimate Planeswalkers.
Which
comes up sometime.
I mean, Jace doesn't technically kill them. You still have to actually kill them.
Yeah. That's fair.
They can just play out, and you might draw your deck out before you
That's fair. But Glorybringer, the reason I'm playing this card is because people are going to be boarding out their removal. They're not going to be... And even if they keep in removal, they can't keep in a whole lot. Because then they'll just draw, like, if they keep in Fatal Pushes for Wandering Fumuerals, you start playing your other creatures, that card will do absolutely nothing against this deck. And they'll sit with it, and it'll die in their hand. The Harness Lightnings are fine to keep in, but things like Grasp of Darkness will be fine if we're boarding in the Glorybringers and Kalitas, but doesn't do much against Torrential Gearhulks.
Yeah, nobody ever expects that. So,
and
transform to sideboard. Control
decks. And the reason to play this card is it's a natural answer to Gideon. Gideon comes down on turn 4 and makes 2/2. This comes down the following turn if you didn't counter it. Kills the Gideon and can clean up the token if you need to, if you're worried they're going to have a removal spell in the untap, which if they're playing Marta vehicles, they'll generally have an Unlicensed Integration. Is another great one to keep in. But once again, they can't keep in all the removal spells, or they'll die because they kept too many in and just draw them all and lose because they're not going to be able to keep up with you in the long game, which is where this deck really excels. So it is great. It's a threat. It's a removal spell. Deals 4 damage to non-dragons, so can't kill other Glorybringers, is a big note. But it can kill most creatures in the format and continue to attack them. It can pair together with Magma Sprays and such, or... Radiant Flames, Flaying Tendrils, or Harness Lightnings to kill bigger creatures, which doesn't come up often, but it has come up. I've paired it with Dynovault Tower a couple times. That has come up, dealing 7 damage. And then one Sphinx of the Final Word. Great against control decks. Great against the Dispossess strategy. That is great against blue-red. Coincidentally, also good against my deck playing 4 Torrential Gearhulks. This is a great way to win if they are playing Dispossesses, hit Dynovault Towers and your Torrential Gearhulks. This is still a good way to win the game outside of Planeswalkers. Hexproof, which, not great, but I do board this in against like Marvel Aetherworks, because it's Hexproof. They can't Ulamog it away. And being a 5/5 Hexproof flyer, it is bigger than most cards that see play in the format, period. Yeah. Things that get up to 5 power aren't a lot outside of Torrential Gearhulks. Control decks are one of the few things doing it.
Even in mid-range decks.
Yeah. A lot of things start at 4 and then can develop up to 5. Or temporarily become 5. But not a lot can beat the 5 power, 5 toughness. And being on Hexproof makes it really hard to answer without an Edict effect. Which has made the card very good. Now, I will show you my...
It's also the best control matchup card.
And I think if you want to play this deck, this is a big thing to know about your...
Marvel decks.
Marvel matchup. You're going to board in all these cards. You're going to board in 11 cards. Now, the only reason we're putting this deck is because Marvel is such a big deck right now. It is a deck you have to have on your format. Confirmed Suspicions, you may not want that. That is up to you. But you definitely want these 10 cards.
If you even want it in your 75.
If you even want it in your 75. Like, that is... As with many of my videos, I will say... It's not great.
It's a fun of.
It's fun of. Not a great...
I'm trying to get a hieroglyphic illumination over it.
Yeah.
In the main deck, specifically.
In your board-out plan, you board out your Fatal Pushes. Collective Brutality is not going to be great.
Nope.
I board out one every turn, even though they have Chandras. You want to keep in 1 Radiant Flames because they're going to have... Creatures that... especially with like the Rug versions, Whirl of Virtuosos, against the more Sultai versions, you maybe can board it. Yeah, Tiles Trackers. They can just overwhelm a board really fast if they especially post-board, they're boarding into a mid-range creature deck. Board, I've been boarding out 1 Essence Scatter. Noxious Gearhulk, that card is really bad.
Yeah.
I think I've been boarding out Anticipate.
Interesting.
What was the other card? I think it was it Confirmed Suspicions?
Yeah, it was.
No, I think I kept that in. Dynovault Tower, there it is. I board out these 10 cards with the new configuration of the deck. And I definitely board in these 10. Considering finding a way to board in the Confirmed Suspicions, but I'm not sold on it. Because the way the especially post-board, the way the Marvel deck's set up is they're boarding out of a lot of their fast energy producers, which in Game 1, your way to beat them is to rely on your counter spells and get to Torrential Gearhulk and just start Torrential Gearhulking, countering spells, and getting a board presence as fast as possible and killing them once you get to Torrential Gearhulk.
You can disallow the Marvel Aetherworks activations.
Yes, if they
That's
did
really
resolve
key to
one.
victory, aside from actually stopping their threats. Once they start reaching 10 mana and casting Ulamog, things get a little rough.
Yeah, Aetherworks specifically is the only deck in the format that actually has a better endgame than this deck. Because our endgame matches the other control decks in the format, and Torrential Gearhulks, but we have Planeswalkers, which a lot of them are avoiding. We have Bedlam Reveler, which can help loot. And Manlands are a big deal. The blue-red control deck has the same endgame. It's odd when 5/6 is the biggest in the format. That's not in like.
As we've been trying to find out, if you can actually get Chandra Flamecaller, it is also not a terrible card in the sideboard.
Which we already mentioned.
Yeah.
Yep.
And if you already mentioned it, that's fine.
Yep. And the biggest thing about the Marvel deck is post-board they board into a mid-range kind of counterspell every deck. They have 1 to 4 negates and 1 to 4 dispels, depending on the person you're playing against. They have access to 4 of those cards, 4 of each of those, and some people play 4 of each of those, which makes your counterspell plan not as effective. But on the flip side, they're boarding out their puzzle knots. They're boarding out some of the less effective energy producers. And going with this more mid-range plans, which means Aetherworks Marvel can't be triggered as consistently. They're not going to get to like 18 energy by the end of the game. They're only getting to like 12 to 15 normally, if the game only goes about 10 turns. So you have to get them dead, because if you give them too long, their Ulamogs are going to beat you. They're going to have more. They're going to have enough counter spells that if you're going to try and play something, they're going to get you to counter. They're going to try to counter your spells, and you have to counter
unless it's a creature, because they don't have that.
Yes, that is the big thing, which is why that we're boarding in.
Almost every Marvel deck just has a negate and dispel, because that's what they're worried about. Is essentially your counter.
Which is what this big little package right here is these creatures. These can't be negated. They can't be dispelled. They can get censored depending on those you're playing against. Some have censor, some don't. But you cannot. Post board, you cannot sit on your heels against the Marvel deck. You need either a really good long game, such as the blue-black control deck does,
and a lot of counterspells,
or which we have a fair amount, but we don't have nearly enough. If we just want to try and join that, because you have to draw them. Can be a problem when you're not playing the blue-red version with more draw spells. You need to have a way to pressure them. Some people play Dragon of Master Outcast, but they keep in their Harness Lightnings. That dies, and they get extra energy to trigger Marvel. Everything will survive 1 Harness Lightning.
And they're all fairly
resilient, fairly big.
Like, Kalitas is the only really small one, but
Glorybringer
is a quick clock.
Yep.
Along with the other, like, Glorybringer into Torrential Gearhulk is always a great.
Yeah. And Glorybringer is a way to manage a board. If they're starting to develop board presence, you can shoot down their creatures. And if they don't have a World of Virtuoso, they're not really going to be able to jump block it. It can pressure a Chandra Flamecaller really, really well if they don't just minus and kill it immediately. Because it'll take it down to 1 loyalty and they won't be able to minus and kill it. So that is really the board plan. Is sideboarding some cheap counter magic, sideboarding summary dismissals for Ulamogs and World Breakers to get rid of them permanently and not have to worry about the triggers. And then creatures to just try and pressure them. I will say my Marvel win percentage isn't super high. But before I was trying to go with a control strategy of just holding up counter spells, trying to rely on Torrential Gearhulks, and that just wasn't working, and I couldn't beat Marvel trying to do that post-board. They just had too many counter spells, and I kept trying, and I just couldn't pick up a post-board game. And then I switched to this, and I started winning a few more games. I'm not going to say it went up dramatically. Yeah.
That was my idea.
Sort of. We both kind of came to the conclusion at the same time.
Half of it was my idea.
Yeah.
Mostly it was Glorybringer.
Yeah, it was mostly Glorybringer. Was his contribution.
You should play Glorybringer. It's great.
I was like, yeah, you're right. And I tested and I was like, man, you're right. I should play too. And it's gone up a bit. It's not great. I think it's probably somewhere between 30 to 35. if I'm being
35 on a good game.
If I'm being super generous, 35 to 40% of a win percentage chance. But against everything else in the format, you have a great matchup. With this configuration of the deck, having the 3 mana Wraths, Zombies and aggro decks is not a terrible matchup. I'm often beating those. Mardu is a 50-50 matchup. The Green-Black Delirium, more mid-rangey black-green decks, great matchup. The win percentage against those is like 80+%. I've dropped a couple matches of those. Yeah, is amazing.
Because hand disruption isn't nearly as good as
Marvel is a bit.
Oh god, Marvel.
Is a bit rough.
Marvel's so rough. It keeps a lot of other decks out of the format too, that you have to worry about.
Yeah, but you can tune this to beat Marvel. Definitely, you can play less just straight up answers, have some more draw spells, have some more counter magic, and you can probably tune this to beat Marvel if that's your big problem. You can definitely tune this to beat whatever you want it to. It definitely has the tools to beat whatever you need to. Having 3 mana Wraths, having 3 mana Wraths that aren't, even though they're not Sweltering Suns, but not stretching the mana base super hard for Radiant Flames has been nice. So that's the Grixis deck I've been working on. I'm working on maybe a Grixis artifact control version of the deck.
That's trying to think of it.
It's kind of tough trying to think of a deck that will go toe to toe with a Marvel Aetherworks deck and not just get hosed by it in game 1 because you're tapping out for artifacts and powerful improvised cards, but they're just less powerful than
best artifact in the deck, Metalwork Colossus.
Not playing that card.
But it costs X less, where X is the number of total.
So that's the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This is Grixis Control in Amonkhet Standard. I've been doing moderately well with it, having a lot of fun. As you'll see, it's very late. I didn't notice it was 1 o'clock in the morning until just now.
Jesus.
But it's a good thing I don't work tomorrow.
Yeah,
so
really good thing.
There we go. You guys have a great night.
Before we go,
Soon
we will be bringing you, if not before this, because I'm going to record it separately,
Mm-hmm.
Blue-White Approach to the Second Sun.
That's his control deck of choice.
Heralded by another god of mine choice, because that's what we'll do.
Yeah, first he played Heliod.
If it has subtype god, I'm probably
first he played Heliod, now he plays Oketra.
And I'm
but you can find us on Twitter at PearsallsBlog and
I believe it's, let me check. I think it's Koslaki number 2, I believe, at Zane Pearsall.
There you go. Not even certain about his Twitter account. That's how often he doesn't use it. If you tweet at him, he'll see it eventually.
I promise. See it in my email within...
He'll see it in his email within 2 months. I need to check my email, actually. You can email us, PearsallsBlog. 300 emails. Yeah, PearsallsBlog at yahoo.com. Wow.
I know, right? Bad. I even keep seeing it every morning. I'm like,
PearsallsBlog at yahoo.com. You can find my articles I've done in the past, and hopefully you can start doing again soon, on cardconfidence.com. Of course, you can always find us here on YouTube. Subscribe, follow. We do have a Twitch channel. I'm going to try and start streaming more often.
Oh, hey!
With our summer schedule, I'm going to try and get a set schedule, but it will change again when
if you actually
college starts.
Go to my Twitter account, the last thing I tweeted from...
this is going to be good, guys.
About a month ago.
Oh wow, I'm impressed. That's pretty recent.
Was this blue-white list? The lands. It's a little bit different online because I don't have the prairie streams on all the lands, but it's very similar. The deck has changed a little bit since the original inclination. Like Renewed Faith was originally a 4 of in the deck, which is a 2-mana cycler. You gain life when you cycle it. And I originally played Commit to Memory, but there was no real sideboard at the time, so it's just the main deck. But we'll be doing a deck take over the now version of it. Hopefully soon.
Yep. So
I'm
pull this up. But yeah, that was the deck. Pull up just my face. Oh, whoa. Nope. I was so wrong. How did it's been a while since I streamed, guys. Our webcam has not, as you can see, gotten very better. We actually lost the webcam we bought, and I need to track it down or buy a new one. Our video quality is not great. Sorry, guys, when it's close up like this. The screen projection's fine. It's when the webcam on the laptop. But we got a new mic. Hopefully, the audio picked up really well. We'll definitely see how that went. You can find us all in the place listed. We're trying to improve, guys. We're trying to get more consistent, but still in college, still working, basically full-time. Life is busy. Can't do this full time. We don't make any money off of it really, unless we're doing well at tournaments, which we're getting back to standard. Hopefully we can start doing well at tournaments. Hopefully I can start recording some league matches and have some more content for you guys at least during the summer. When school starts back up, it'll probably go back down to nothing, but we're gonna try, and we hope to see you guys in the future, and that you guys have a great night. We'll see you next time, guys. Bye. Chris, number 2 outro.
Copyrighted. It'll be fun.